I think that we have to remember that sometimes getting started is the hardest part. Hello and welcome to Yarn to Table. I'm Celeste and this is a show about my knitting life. Welcome to all my returning viewers as well as my new viewers. If this is your very first time watching me, I hope you find something here that you like and that you will hit the subscribe button so you can join me every other Monday to talk about knitting. You can find show notes for every episode linked in the Ravelry group, which is linked in the doobly-doo. And the Ravelry group is also where you're going to find threads for knit-alongs, giveaways, things like that. There's also an introduce yourself thread, so please introduce yourself if you haven't yet. I'd love to hear where you're watching from and a little bit about your knitting life as well. There's also an AMA thread, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask away over there. And you can follow me on Instagram and Ravelry as well, at CelesteFull, to see some behind the scenes knitting, some other peeks at my life, and all of my project pages, which are where you're going to find up-to-date information on what I'm working on, including the needle size that I used, and the yarn, and the colorways, and all that kind of stuff. Though you can also find a lot of that in the show notes as well. All of those project pages link directly to the episodes of Yarn to Table where I talked about those projects. So if you see something that you're interested in hearing about in depth, you can find the correct back episode to watch from that project page. And today we do have an exciting announcement, a winner for the giveaway that's going on, the knit-along I should say, that's going on right now. So I'm hosting a year-long knit-along called the Fiber Quest KAL, and we have just come to the end of our first land of fiber, which is the land of camelids. So it's very exciting. The winner is getting this beautiful, pure, superfine alpaca, undyed yarn that has this absolutely gorgeous marled sort of look to it with all these different colors in there, all of which were grown naturally on the alpaca. Just beautiful, soft, wonderful yarn that I love and will be saying goodbye to very soon as I send it out to our winner. And our winner is Velvetina. So Velvetina, congratulations. This is now making its way over to your stash as soon as you message me on Ravelry and let me know your full name and address where I can get this sent out to. And thank you to everyone who participated in Camelids. The Land of Goats just started this week on March 1st, and that's going to be running through the end of April. So make sure you're letting everybody know what you're working on in that chatter thread. Check out the video linked below that's all about goat fiber if you need any inspiration or ideas about what kind of fiber and project you might want to choose for this. You can find all of the details about the KAL and the rules there in those threads on the pages on the Ravelry groups page, as well as in the About the Fiber Quest KAL video, which is in that playlist that's down in the doobly-doo. And I'm excited to see what you guys make. So today I'm wearing a sweater that I knit I guess I finished it in the fall. And this is The Pavement by Vera Valimaki. I'm wearing it out of Stranded Dye Works on her Oasis MCN base in the colorway Shiner. And I got this yarn over the summer when we went down to Nashville for the eclipse, and it was at House of Yarn, which is a very beautiful, awesome local yarn store. If you haven't seen my Vlogmas videos, you can take a peek at it in those. And yesterday I finally got around to pilling, taking the pillar and kind of getting all of the fluff off of this from a little bit of a washing mishap that happened to this poor baby. I talk more about that in the Land of Goats video down below. Basically, This is an MCN blend, and the cashmere in it, I mean, I wouldn't have put even a superwash in hot water, but I accidentally put it in hot water in the washing machine, and the cashmere was trying to mat, and I was able to rescue it. It is a tiny bit shorter. It's a tunic length, and it was, you know, like totally covering everything, and now it's just a little bit higher than that, but it's still a nice wearable shape, but it did have a ton of fluff all over it. So I was able to finally take the pillar to that, and I had this like huge mass of fiber that had come off of it, just like a purple cloud, but it looks so much nicer now. I'm really glad that I took the time to do that, and it almost looks like new now that I've done that. So yeah, that was a close call. I'm happy to be wearing it again and excited to have it shown off back on the show. So let's see here. I do not have any FOs for you this week. I don't know if you can hear Ryan in the background. I'm drinking some toasted rice green tea by Numi today. Recording in the morning, which I oftentimes will not get around to this until a little bit later in the day. So I thought a nice bit of caffeine would be nice. And so I don't have any FOs, but I do have a lot to show you in the way of whips, and a lot to show you in the way of stash enhancement, and a little bit to talk about for On the Horizon. So we really should jump into it. Let's just start with the most exciting whip. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I have pulled out this beautiful baby and been making quite a lot of progress on it, and this is so exciting to talk about. So last you saw, I had been knitting up this body, and I was, I think, almost halfway through the color work here. I went ahead and finished this all up last week, and then last weekend I steeked the armholes. So exciting, my very first time steeking. And I knit one of the sleeves over the past week. So this is the Ebba, which is a design by Deanna Walla for Quince & Co. And I knit it out of Knit Picks Wool of the Andes non-superwash sport weight. And I had been, you know, really kind of burning out a little bit. I think a big part of it for me was, and I'm still kind of struggling with this, I'm not super comfortable with color work, and it can be intimidating to me if I've not worked on color work for a while. I build it up in my mind, like how challenging it's going to be or how uncomfortable it's going to be or whatever, and by the time I actually pick it up again, it's not really that bad. But I also do have some work that I need to do in terms of figuring out better ways to tension the yarn to do color work more effectively, more ergonomically, and more quickly. So I'm a self-taught knitter, and because of that, I hold my yarn and needles in a very strange way. I don't really tension my yarn, so I kind of throw with my left hand. Basically what I do is I am holding with my left hand, and I'm not really tensioning the yarn in that perfect way so that you can just pick with the right needle. Instead, I'm sort of picking up the yarn with every stitch and throwing it, which isn't that slow, but it's not as fast as it could be if I were really picking in the proper continental style. And like I said, the reason that I do it this way is that I taught myself to knit, so I'd never actually seen anyone do anything that you were supposed to do, and I just sort of figured out a way with my own hands and these needles that it would work to make the yarn go in the way that I had seen in an illustration in a book. So I would like very much to take some time at some point and work on changing it up so that I'm picking properly and tensioning the yarn properly and not doing so much movement with my left hand. But because I'm not tensioning it properly. One-handed color work doesn't really work for me because even with a single color, I'm just not having that strand like run over my finger and just like, I'm kind of dropping it and picking it up and dropping it and picking it up in a weird kind of way. It's hard to explain, I know, but so basically I do two-handed color work. Two-handed color work is pretty uncomfortable because my right hand is having to work, and because I knit technically continental with the left hand, that's very awkward for me. So that works, and it works fine, but I don't really even have, like, the more I do that, I'm sure the more I get comfortable with it. But I also just think generally with any kind of knitting, I'm going to be better if I can learn to be a proper picker. And that's just sort of been something that I haven't taken the time to prioritize because I know that learning to do it is going to really slow me down. I'm really going to have to take some time and focus on it. And, you know, obviously right now I've got so many other things going on, and I just kind of want to unwind with knitting at the end of the day and not, you know, make it be one more sort of thing where I'm like really challenging myself. So all of that is to say that, you know, I'm doing color work. The gauge is great. It's all looking fine. It's all nice and good and whatever, but I'm slower at it than I wish I were. And I also tend to get intimidated if I take a break and then I come back to it. I start to think that it's going to be harder and I have to like sort of get over that hurdle again, this kind of fear of it. So anyway, I picked it up again and I was really excited to get going and get done. I came up here, I did the shoulder seams, and these were recommended to be a 3-needle bind off with the seam actually on the outside. But because that would be the only place there would be anything visible like that, and you know, as you can see, it's like it goes into the red of the sleeve and there's going to be this red collar. I just thought it would be a lot smoother and look nicer if it didn't have that. So I did it inside out. And I did the seam along the inside. Obviously you could do a Kitchener stitch if you just wanted it to be completely seamless, but I wanted a bit more of that structure that the 3-needle bind off creates. So I did that. And then let's see, there's a lot of things I want to tell you about this. Okay, the other thing is it's a little bit too wide. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Now it's going to be fine. It's just going to be like kind of a cozier fit. But it's a little too wide for a couple reasons. One is, I think I have finally learned after this project that I need to stop choosing the large size when I'm knitting sweaters. So I think it's really easy for us to look at that chest measurement size because that's the one that you see on Ravelry. That's sort of like this first size that they show to show you the different sizes at the beginning of the pattern, and you have to go and look at the schematics to really notice shoulders and waist and all this different kind of stuff. So when you're first sort of thinking that you're going to do a sweater and you're kind of trying to figure out how much yarn you need and stuff, like, I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of assume that you're going to be knitting the size that makes sense with your bust measurement. But I have a different body than a lot of people, and I have a very large bust measurement in comparison to other measurements on my body, including my waist and my shoulders, and basically everything else that my sweater is going to affect. I have large hips as well, so I'm not like a super top heavy person. I'm an hourglass, but my bust measurement usually will tell me that I need a large size, and yet for my shoulders and my waist and everything else that a sweater is affecting, I'm more of a medium. So I've kind of finally learned that on this sweater, and learned that like I just need to be comfortable with the fact that because of my body type, I'm not going to have as much ease across the bust as other people might have, and that's okay. If I choose that medium size, it's going to be the proper amount of ease for all the rest of me, and that's just something about the way that my body fits into a design. I'm just going to have less ease across the bust because I have a bigger bust, and I just have to like recognize that and kind of make my peace with it. And if I want more ease across the bust, I need to alter the shape of the sweater instead of just going up a size. So that's one of the reasons. I also have a little bit of extra stitches up here because I did something, I somehow screwed up the waist shaping and increased, I think, like one time too many or something, because by the time I got to the color work, I had too many stitches on the needles. I just sort of altered the charts to make it work because I didn't want to rip all the way back to the waist, and that's fine, and it's working, you know, it's whatever. But yeah, for both of those reasons, this is just a little broad. Now, it would already be a bit of a drop shoulder because that's the design of it, but it's just a little bit even further than I think it ideally would be. But that's all right. It's kind of a nice big cozy sweater, and I'm good with that. But for, you know, because it's that way, I thought it definitely needed to have full length sleeves. In the pattern, the sleeves are 3/4 length like these, and I had already been thinking that I might want full length sleeves just because I thought it would look nice, and this is such a, you know, kind of heavy, warm sweater anyway, that it felt to me like, why wouldn't I just make it a full long sleeve sweater and make it like a really warm sweater? Some people might think this is so warm I should do 3/4 length sleeves so that I don't overheat, which I think also is logical. But for me, I think, you know, if I have trouble overheating, I can always roll them up or push them up or whatever. I would rather have the option for it to just be one of my warmest sweaters. So that, in combination with the fact that I really like the length of full length sleeves, I decided to do full length sleeves. And I just continued to decrease. You can see all of my stitch markers in here. I just continued to decrease at the same rate. And I think I ended up adding like 4 more decreases, something like that. And I just tried it on, you know, to make sure that it was the length that I wanted it to be. This is the first time that I have used stitch markers to mark all of my decreases or increases or whatever for like sleeves or waist shaping, and I really liked the simplicity of this. In the past, I have used a row counter on my phone, and that works fine, but this was just so simple and intuitive and easy to sort of like get the bigger picture of, you know, what you're looking at, and I was a fan of this. I think I will do this again in the future, you know, provided that it's convenient to grab these stitch markers wherever I am when I'm working on it. And then, okay, so then I want to talk about, okay, I want to say one more thing about color work in general, which is about yarn dominance, and then I'm going to talk about the steeking process. So yarn dominance is when one of the colors in your stranded color work is knit at a slightly looser than the other one, and therefore it protrudes a little bit more. And basically what that means is, like, here you would want the white to be dominant rather than the black, because the white is creating the intricate patterns. It's sort of the front, what am I trying to say? It's the foreground and the black is the background, right? If the black was dominant, if those stitches were a little bit bigger than the white, the designs would kind of shrink back. They would become a little muddied and blurred at the edges. They wouldn't be so sharp. Traditionally, the way that Norwegians do their color work, at least according to Arne Carlos and Skandir, is that they don't believe you should have yarn dominance at all. They think you should have exactly the same tension with both colors, and all of your stitches should strive to be the same size, which is fine. That's not how I learned color work, and I think there are different traditions in different places and at different times. I think maybe the idea of yarn dominance could be a more modern thing, or it could just be a thing from a different part of the world. But I did learn about yarn dominance, and what I learned about it is that you should have your dominant color always coming underneath the background color, which means if you're two-handed knitting, it should be in your left hand, and that's going to make it just slightly looser than the one in your right hand. Now, I'm curious to try to knit color work without a dominant yarn and do equal tensioning, but I know that I would have to do one hand, I assume I would have to do one-handed stranded knitting instead of two-handed stranded knitting for it to be even, because using two different hands, I think it's kind of inevitable that it's going to, that the one in your right hand is going to be a little bit tighter. Possibly that's not inevitable, I don't know, and I don't know traditionally in Norway if they do it two-handed or if they do one-handed. This is kind of new to me, this idea that you don't want color dominance. But I would be, I'm open to experimenting with that, seeing if I like that look better. But I think that I like this look better, the idea of it actually pushing out and being prominent. And certainly for where I'm at right now, where I have my own tensioning problems and I kind of need to work two-handed because I'm just, not there yet. This is working fine for me for now. So that's a word on yarn dominance, and what I want to point out that's interesting in here is basically every row the white is the dominant color, but there were a couple rows here where I wanted the black to be dominant, and that's because the sort of decoration is this white, but where you have just the every other stitch in the middle, if the black was sort of pulling back, you would actually have less of a clear, sharp image of that white, because those sort of spaces where the black is would be smaller. And so I just thought it would look better if the black was the dominant color on those rows. So I did switch the black to my left hand for that row, and the same over here for this. And as you can see, that really pushes those black pieces forward and makes them more prominent. And I think it looks really nice. So that's the story on yarn dominance there. And now I'll talk a little bit about steeking. On Instagram, I steeked these live, or I steeked the first one live. And I did it as part of an Instagram story. So the actual steeking was live and that disappeared after 24 hours, but the rest of the story I made into a featured story. So you can just find it at the top of my Instagram account, which again is Celeste Vole. If you missed it, you can check it out there. And I talk a lot in detail there about the process and why I, made different decisions that I made, and all of that kind of thing. But basically, I did a reinforced crochet. I talk more about this in the Instagram story, as I said, because that was recommended in the pattern. And I know some people say that you don't need any kind of reinforcement, but I wasn't sure, I don't think this is the absolute stickiest yarn, even though it's non-superwash. I don't think it's woolen spun, and it's just not as grippy as it could be. So I thought some kind of reinforcement, especially with my first time and especially with the pattern calling for it, I thought that would be good. And then after I steeked, I picked up for the sleeve, and I'll show you that on this side where I've actually done it. And this is a really cool thing. So you pick up, this is where the steek happened. Here's your sort of vertical stripes from that. And you pick up a few rows over. And the way that you do it, you're actually picking up, over here I'll show you, you're actually picking up in these vertical spaces between one column of stitches and the next. So rather than picking up through the middle of the stitches like you might do horizontally, picking up vertically, you're actually picking up in between the columns, and that creates this really nice sort of running stitch over here, which you can see in the red. And that helps additionally to reinforce the steek. So this sleeve is like not going anywhere, which is awesome. And yeah, so then I picked that up. I did the, you know, that in red, and I went through the color work chart for the sleeves, which you can see my floats in the back there. And knitted it full length. And now I'm gonna need to do the other sleeve and the sort of stand collar and weave everything in, block it. That'll all be done. So I don't know, this could be done by the time I see you next. It depends on how much time I'm fine to put into it, but I'm feeling very, very, very good about this project. I'm just so pleased to have kind of got my mojo back on it and sticking, you know, moving toward being ready to steek, I think really motivated me to get through the rest of that color work. The fact that I was excited to do it. And then because I had just done the steeking was so fun, I think that motivated me to get all the way down that sleeve. So I've set it aside for a little while now, and hopefully I will kind of be in the mood and have the time and energy and space in my mind to go ahead and pick up that next sleeve sometime soon. And then once I get through the color work on that next sleeve, I think it's going to be pretty mindless from that point on. So that's my first whip, and then the other whips that I have to show you, we'll just catch up on some of these that you've already seen. So this is the Time Traveler knee socks. I talked a bit about my kind of challenges with them last week and whether I'm gonna have enough yarn and you know what's going on. I've just made a tiny bit of progress this week from where the cheese is. Just knitting here and there, kind of very much, you know, just kind of a couple rows at a time. It's my kind of throw it in your bag just in case you end up being stuck in traffic or, you know, waiting around somewhere or whatever, sort of knitting. But the very kind Andy of 10,000 Stitches sent me this, which is her scraps from some Time Traveler Felice. And I have not unwound it to see exactly how much is here, but it looks like it's at least one pattern repeat. So I'm gonna, you know, get to the end of this second sock and then try and figure out my situation of how I'm gonna distribute this and what I'm gonna do in terms of contrast toes, and hopefully be able to find a way to make both of these socks as long as I want them to be. So we'll come to that later. Thank you very much, Andy. What a sweet gesture that was, and I believe it's going to help me out a lot. So the next whip is this Guernsey wrap by Jared Flood that I'm knitting out of Brooklyn Tweed Arbor. Excuse me. I'm dropping it on the floor. And this is just a very nice, pretty mindless textured pattern that I've been working on a lot of times when I really don't have the presence of mind to do anything more complicated. And it's been a nice, comforting knit. This progress keeper is where I was when you last saw it. And so there's the cast on. And I've done a little bit more since then. Not a ton more new to say about this. I did talk about it more in detail in the last episode if you want to hear more. But it smells lovely and sheepy. I've just been enjoying working with this yarn so much. This is my first time working with the Arbor after a few projects working with Shelter. And the Arbor is 100% Targhee, whereas the Shelter is Targhee Columbia blend, and the Shelter has those sort of like bits of tweed in it. So this is a bit of a smoother, slightly softer yarn. It's a DK weight instead of a worsted, but it's got a lot of those similar qualities that I love about Shelter in terms of just the sort of just the sheepiness of it, and just how. Just what a joy it is to touch and to smell, and the springiness of it. It's, I believe, also woolen spun. I know the Shelter is, and yeah, I've just really been enjoying working on that. And then I have another project with the same yarn, different colorway, that I'm calling a whip because I've already like poured so much time and energy into it, although I actually don't have anything to show for it. So let me talk you through this. Well, I do have one thing to show for it, which is a gauge swatch. This is the Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, as I said, in the colorway Ventnor. And I am making this kirigami sweater, which is this, from Brooklyn Tweed's newest collection. So here's the thing. First, I did my little gauge swatch. I went down in needle size because I tend to need to do that. And I still got 4 3/4 inches instead of 4 inches. But the fabric that I got is really dense and just exactly perfect what I want it to be. I don't think I want to go any denser than this. So I've decided to instead do the math and knit the smallest size, which I believe is going to work out perfectly. And I hope that's not a mistake. But yeah, this will be like my first real challenge in doing that kind of thing. But I think I'm up for it. I'm very happy with this fabric that I'm getting, and this is on a size 4 needle. It's recommended for 5, and it's DK yarn. So I think to actually get gauge, I would have to go down probably to a US 2. And I just don't think, for one thing, I don't think it would be as enjoyable an experience to knit on such small needles. I really like the fabric I'm getting here. I think it might be too dense for me. And also, I don't know, like, part of me is excited to be able to knit the smallest size because it'll knit up faster. So I kind of think I just want to experiment with that. And, you know, if it's a mistake, then I will learn from it. But you kind of have to just try certain things at least once. So I'm going to try doing the math and knitting the wrong size at least once. It wants me to cast on, so it's a bottom-up sweater, and it wants a 2x2 rib. And it asked me to cast on in this way where you do 2 stitches with long tail, 2 stitches with twisted German, back and forth. And I tried that. I didn't love it. It still had some level of ridge, and I thought, why don't I rip this out and do a tubular? Whew, boy. So, oh, and by the way, that's another thing I could tell you about this Ebba. I did a tubular bind off. So with the Ebba, I did a tubular cast on at the bottom for 1x1 rib, and I did a tubular bind off here at the sleeve. And if you don't know, tubular, it's a little hard to show in black, but with a tubular, you don't have any kind of ridge. The stitches just sort of fold over on themselves and disappear over the edge. And the way you do that is you kind of have turned it into double knitting there at the end and created this little tube, essentially. Just like a very small one. And it's just a beautiful way to do a ridgeless edge, which I adore. So the bind off is actually very simple. You do it with a needle, what am I trying to say? A tapestry needle. It's kind of similar to Kitchener stitch. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but you know, you kind of have the long tail like you would with Kitchener stitch, and you follow the series of in here and out there, and it's really like not such a big deal. The tubular cast on is a bit more complicated. The way that I've done it has always involved waste yarn and knitting about 4 different rows by the time you have essentially what is your cast on edge done. So it takes a little bit of extra time. I always have to watch a video to make it happen. I don't have it memorized, but it's worth it. So that's 1x1. This sweater called for 2x2. Obviously, it doesn't really matter. I could just substitute one by one, but I thought, why don't I learn a new skill? Why don't I find a 2x2 tubular cast on in the round? In the round is the other part of it that makes it a little bit more complicated. A lot of the tutorials for tubular cast-ons do not work in the round. So I went and I was looking at, you know, this one tutorial, and I started it and I got partway through it and it just wasn't really working for me. And, you know, then I tried this other one and I did it and it wasn't really working for me. And then I found this blog, so those were like videos. Then I found this blog with photo tutorial, and people were saying like, oh, this is so much easier, this is so genius, so much simpler than these other ways of doing it. And I was like, cool. It involved a lot more steps. It involved a foundation of 4 rounds of a waste yarn, and then 3 rounds of your regular yarn, and then you had to do this thing where you were picking up the legs and knitting them and purling into the stitches, where it was just a single round, but it took a long time. So through all of this, doing a 192 stitch cast on, I sat there and I watched 2 full episodes of Queer Eye just doing this. And then I went to cut away the waste yarn and the entire thing came unraveled because I guess I hadn't done it properly. I mean, I was really careful. I feel like the tutorial was not good. There was no one saying they had tried it and that it worked for them. The only comments were saying, I'm gonna try this. And I kind of feel like there was an error in the tutorial because I was really careful. Either that or it was some kind of sick joke that someone thought, hey, I'll make a tutorial and I'll waste someone's time. I don't know. It was just a nightmare, you guys. I have tried to work on this the last 2 days, tried to get it cast on, and it has been so frustrating. So today I got down the Principles of Knitting book, which is a giant, you know, dictionary sized, essentially dictionary of knitting. It has this big index and you can look up anything. And I was looking up tubular cast-ons and it didn't have anything for 2x2 rib or for in the round. Like, this is kind of a new thing, like a new method, but that just sort of made me go, okay, like maybe it's not, I'm not gonna say it's not possible, but I'm gonna say maybe someone hasn't figured out how to do it properly yet. Or if they have, I have not been able to find their tutorial. So it's frustrating because I feel like it shouldn't be that different than 1x1. But I don't actually, like I haven't done 1x1 tubular cast on enough to really have my brain wrapped around the exact mechanics of how it's working. As I said, I don't even have it memorized. So I'm kind of just following the steps when I do it, which means that I can't really figure out how you would translate that to 2x2 or whether such a thing is even possible, because I don't fully understand the mechanics of it. What I've realized is I either need to give up on the idea of a tubular cast on or I need to give up on the idea of a 2x2 cast on. I'm either going to do a tubular 1x1, as I have done with the Ebba, or I'm going to have to do it 1x1. Which again, isn't a big deal. It's not like a huge design change or anything. It's just frustrating to me that I can't. And the thing is, so if you look at this yoke, this beautiful textured yoke, the texture goes perfectly into the 2x2 rib of the collar. A 1x1 rib at the collar would totally ruin that effect. And if I have 2x2 up at the collar, I don't really want to have 1x1 on my cuffs and my band, my waistband. So I think that I need to do 2x2. And I think I need to just go back where I started and cast on the way that the pattern asked me to, even though I've already done that once and ripped it out. And that's okay. This is why we experiment, we learn, we always take away something from it. Right now I feel like I have nothing to show for hours that I've spent trying to get this sweater started, But a lot of times the beginning of a project is the hardest part of the project. You're trying to figure out your gauge, you're trying to figure out if the yarn is suited to the project, you're, you know, sometimes experimenting with a new cast on, you're figuring out if you chose the right size. I've gotten caught up at the beginnings of projects before. I mean, I think you may remember there's a sweater that, I don't remember what it's called anymore, the wispy sweater that I was trying to do last year, and I eventually set it aside because just getting it started was such a challenge. I could not figure out what was going on with my gauge and what size I had chosen, and I think I was doing tubular for that too, but I might have been, I don't remember. There were several problems with that. I'm not sitting on break right now. I'm gonna like get to it when the weather warms up again, but I think that we have to remember that sometimes getting started is the hardest part, and, you know, not get completely deflated by that. So I'm not deflated. I'm going to cast on with this again, probably tomorrow, and you know, I'm gonna get going on it, and it's gonna be fine. And I don't regret that I tried to alter it to tubular, because I learned a little bit about that, and that's okay. Like, it's okay. So I don't know, I'm a little bit frustrated. I wish that I had something more to show you. I wish that I had not spent, you know, 2 hours of knitting yesterday on something that immediately unraveled, but sometimes that is just the way things go. That's all right. So that is everything that I have to talk about for WIPs, but I do have some stuff to talk about for On the Horizon. You may have noticed there's another gauge swatch on here, and that is for the Sunset Highway pullover by Caitlin Hunter. So this pattern was generously gifted to me during Get Your Yarn Wishes Granted by a lovely viewer. Thank you so much. You know who you are. And I have talked in the past about wanting to do it out of some Gilmore Girls themed yarn. So this was a club color that I got from Woolberry Fiber Co. called It's Magical. And I have another club colorway from her called Bjork Snow Girl. I'm going to use what's left over of my Homespun House Gilmore Girls Club, Pop-Tart Dilemma. And then I'm trying to get my mitts on some I Smell Snow by Stress Knits. Stress Knits is a yarn dyer and a podcaster, and she is, her name is Stacy, and she is newly pregnant, which I know from Instagram, and I can only assume that that has something to do with the fact that she has been MIA for a little bit on the internet, and you know, no information or news about what's going on with her yarn. I messaged her a little while ago before she had announced her pregnancy, and just sort of after the holidays, to see you know, if there were plans to dye any I Smell Snow soon. I sort of decided on this project right after she had done a pre-order for I Smell Snow, which of course I missed out on because I didn't know I needed it. So I was kind of feeling silly, and I was like, oh gosh, I missed this pre-order. And I didn't hear back from her, and then I found out that she, you know, through Instagram, that she was pregnant, and I started to go, okay, that might be on hold for a little while now. The dyeing, she hasn't updated the podcast. I'm not gonna know, you know, if that's going to be an option before I want to actually knit this sweater. And so I decided that I should see if I can buy some from somebody's stash, because I really had my heart set on that colorway. I just absolutely love that colorway, and I didn't want to substitute anything else. So I got on Ravelry, and I messaged a few different people, and I've heard back from several of them. People are so nice. Like, they message you back even when they're not willing to sell it, to be like, oh, good luck, I hope you find it, sorry, I have plans. Like, I messaged basically everybody who had some ice melt snow in their stash, and just immediately got like a flood wave of people responding. Most of them obviously were not willing to sell it, but a few of them were, and I've been in communication with a couple of them. I, you know, sort of responded to a few different ones because I want to make sure if something, you know, if I don't hear from somebody again, or it dries up, or they change their mind, or one person was on vacation, so she might be able to do it, but in a little while, you know. So I've still kind of got the communications going out, haven't exactly locked it down yet. But I think I'm going to be getting some, fingers crossed, and I'm going to probably get started on the sweater anyway before that even comes. And yeah, so that's exciting. Excited to show you guys that. I believe I'm going to make that my new Return to Stars Hollow knitting project. It's a little more complicated than what I usually work on during the podcast, so we'll have to see if it's too complicated or not, but I think that could be fun. I like to have a nice little treat, like a special project that I work on when I'm recording that, because yeah, it makes me look forward to it, which is nice. So that's what's going on with this. The gauge is kind of weird. I'm a little bit concerned. So this is a sweater that's designed to have a lot of extra ease. I think it's designed for 5 to 8 inches of ease. I would ideally want less than that. So if I'm going by my new model of like, I'm gonna knit the medium size instead of the large size, then I still am like, okay, well that's still gonna be a little bit too big for what I want ideally. And then I knit up this gauge swatch, and the gauge is kind of loose for a colorwork sweater, and yet the swatch is a little on the small side. So that's confusing. So now I have so many variables that I'm dealing with. Like I don't want to make the gauge any tighter because then the size of it just comes even further down. Or maybe I do because I want the sweater to be smaller, and just all of the idea of like, I want it to be smaller than it's supposed to fit, but I need to do this size, but I need to have this gauge, but I need it to be this density of fabric. Like, this stuff is not lining up with any of it in the way that, like, it's just become way too complicated. I'm not able to feel confident that I know what, like, effect I'm gonna get from certain choices. I'm also knitting it with superwash, and so that can tend to grow, and oh my god, I don't know. So I think I'm gonna have to relinquish a bit of my desire to be controlling on this one and kind of choose something, go for it, see if it works. I don't really think I have many other options with this project. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. To be continued. If you've knit that project, I'd love to hear how your feelings were in terms of the gauge and fitting it, and the sizes and the ease and all that kind of thing. I'd be curious. You know, I've looked at some different project pages for that, but I'd love to hear from you directly if you have any thoughts. So, the other on the horizon is also a Caitlin Hunter pattern, and that is Alyeska, which is her newest really beautiful stranded colorwork sweater. I'll pop up a photo just so that you can see how gorgeous this is. And I love it, and I really, really love the colors that the sample is knit in, which are from a kit. It's actually a bit of a fade for the background. There's actually a lot of colors in there, and it's a kit that was dyed by Ritual Dyes in a collaboration with Caitlin Hunter for this sweater. And because I loved these colors so much, that was really the version that I wanted. So I decided I would go looking for the kit. Now the kits came out a little while before, and I wasn't on the ball about that, you know, because I decided I wanted to do it later. And The kit has this sort of lovely rusty orange color in the color work out of a mohair, with the rest being out of wool, which is just such a cool detail. Unfortunately, the only kit that was left had it all out of the wool instead of the mohair as an option. So I would prefer the mohair, but I'm okay with the fact that I'm not going to have it. I'm also a little hesitant about the fact that the kits were all dyed up on single ply yarn, which ordinarily would not be my choice for a sweater because it tends to pill and it's not as durable. This is going to be such a beautiful sweater, and I would like to be able to just wear it anytime that I wanted and not have to be crazy precious with it. But you know, you got to take the options that are available to you. So I went ahead and ordered that kit, and I'm going to be knitting it up with the single ply yarn, and I think it's going to be really, really, really beautiful. So I don't know when I'm going to knit that up exactly, but I'm pretty excited about it. However, we all know that I can kind of stutter a bit with the color work projects. So this is like a big color work project. Maybe it will be enough of a motivation for me to kind of get it together in terms of my picking continental style and kind of learn to tension my yarn properly, and maybe experiment with one-handed color work. I don't know. Or maybe just doing that is going to make me more comfortable, so that even two-handed color work is just going to go faster. I don't know, but I know that I love this sweater and I want to make it. So that's happening. That's everything on the horizon. I do have some stash enhancement to share with you, a lot actually. And then for chit chat, it's Oscars Sunday here. It's going to be posting the next day, but we're going to the Oscars party tonight, and I'm a huge Oscars nut, huge movie nut. So I thought for chit chat, I would just tell you my thoughts on all of the Best Picture nominees, because I have seen all of them. As well as on one honorary mention that is not nominated for Best Picture, but should be. So, stash enhancement. A little while ago, I placed an order with Nomadic Yarns for some yarn and a couple project bags, and they finally came. Crazy excited. Okay, I'll show you the project bags first. This is just a cute little sock cube, and it is Hocus Pocus fabric. Really adorable. Like, I like how it's kind of, I want to say kind of subtle, and I know that sounds nutty, but you know, for Hocus Pocus fabric, I think you could go crazier with it. It's got the little brooms and vacuum cleaners. Oh my god, so cute. And then the little witches. I love it. I love it. So this is going to be so much fun for all kinds of little projects, especially around Halloween, and I'll definitely use it when I use my Hocus Pocus themed yarn that I got from Wool Jewel when I was one of the winners of her Big Scary KAL last Halloween. So that's so much fun. Love it. I now have 2 Halloween project bags, and I'm definitely going to use them at all times of year because I do not care. After all, I wear Christmas socks all times of year as well. The second project bag is a bit bigger. It's made for a couple skeins of yarn, and this is just the most beautiful Harry Potter fabric I've ever seen. I've never found such a subtle, minimal, just really beautiful Harry Potter fabric before. And this is all these cute little locations, and it has my favorites, like Hagrid's hut, and the burrow is on here somewhere. Oh, it's got the castle. I think this might be number 12, Grimmauld Place. This is Ollivander's. Why can't I find the burrow? Oh, there it is, the burrow. That's my favorite place in all of Harry Potter. Probably all of the world. And there's another one on this side. So, in between, it's got these little snitches and glasses and mugs of butterbeer. And I just love how it's in these neutral colors, and it just transports me. I love this fabric. In here, I have a couple balls of Nomadic Yarns yarn. So exciting. Okay, so I have talked recently about how I like Knit Picks Felici and I use it a lot, but it really does not compare to hand knit sock yarn. Hand knit, oh my god, hand dyed self-striping sock yarn is what I'm trying to say. And for hand dyed, I have only used Jinx, and it is just a joy, just an absolute joy to knit with. It's like on another level. The depth of color, the quality of the base is better than Felici. I just absolutely love her yarn. So now that I'm really sold on the idea of indie self-striping yarn, I thought I would treat myself to a couple balls of it from another really beautiful self-striping hand dyer, which is Nomadic Yarns, and they have so many beautiful colorways, and I got two of them. This first one is Harry Potter themed. It is called Mischief Managed, and it just has this like navy and pale blue, black and brown, and then this beautiful kind of pinky greeny speckled colorway here, which is just so lovely. Absolutely in love with this yarn. And I ordered these on her Brit sock, which is a 80% superwash BFL, 20% nylon base. I'm really excited to try BFL, which I have not knit with before. I have heard that it is more durable than merino, and therefore makes a really, really great choice for socks. And it's called the Brit sock base because BFL is a British sheep breed. They're quite, I don't know if they were actually developed there, but they're quite, you know, popular. So this is definitely not as soft as a merino, but I do not mind that one little bit. It is perfectly soft enough, really, really quite soft, quite lovely. And it's gonna be more durable, so I'm excited. It's a 2-ply, it looks like. And the color is just phenomenal, phenomenal. I have so much more fun knitting socks with beautiful hand-dyed yarn than when I knit with like a commercial yarn, and it just makes all the difference. Like, I will just zoom on them and just want to knit on them all the time, and I just enjoy it so much. Okay, so the other one that I got is actually inspired by a knitting podcaster, Jacqueline of Brooklyn Knit Folk, and this is called Knit Folk, and it's knit up in basically her color palette, which is a lot of my favorite colors as well. This beautiful mossy green, kind of a teal turquoise, a mauvey gray, and then this like purpley navy color. Really spectacular. And then this like oxblood maroon color in there as well. So, wow, love this. Now, these colors Ryan adores, and I'm pretty sure he's gonna want this for his own socks. And I may or may not fight him on that. I don't know. I might do that thing where I knit them up for myself and then I use them to make just the cuffs on a pair for him so that we can share. But this is really, really special. I haven't shown it to him yet, but I just foresee him loving this because he loves purple and green. He would probably wear this as well. Okay, he really likes stripy socks, so I think this is a great investment because I'm probably going to be able to get a pair for each of us out of those if I use them just for the cuffs for his. So yeah, or maybe I'll use them just for the cuffs for mine and be more generous. Hey, I'm hand knitting the boy socks. That's pretty generous, right? We knitters, we are so generous and yet so selfish at the same time. Okay, so there's that. I have more. Oh, do I have more? This is a big stash enhancement week. I feel like everything came at once, and I didn't like buy anything this week, but like everything showed up at once. Well, the last 2 weeks, I should say. But I don't even think I had stash enhancement last time, so. Anyway, just know that I'm not usually this gluttonous. Okay, so I got a couple club yarns, and I will be honest, I am not as thrilled with these as I often am. And one or both of them may turn into a giveaway prize in the future, simply because I think we should be thrilled with our yarn, and I think both of these are truly spectacular in their own way. They're just not exactly what fits into my knitting style, and so I really, really would like them to go to somebody who's going to be absolutely thrilled with them, because they are really special. So I'll show you what I mean. The first one, I ordered some cat sandwich fibers because her yarn can be hard to get a hold of. When I saw on Instagram she was doing a 1-month club, I just thought, hey, I like everything that she makes, let me just try it. This is gorgeous and so much just what she does, but the two colors are just a little bit bold for anything I think I would like to make. And that's this. It is called First Bloom is the colorway, and it's on her trusty base, which is 75/25. She does such incredible speckles. I really, really love her speckles. For me, even on a sock, I think like a micro stripe of green and orange, which is what I think this will knit up as, is just gonna be a bit much. I'm not a huge orange person. The contrast of green and orange is very dramatic. I just think it's gonna be a little bit much for me, even though it's really spectacular. So I think this would be ideal to do as some kind of a giveaway in the future, so that somebody who really loves it can have it. The other club is the second installment of this round of the Homespun House Harry Potter club yarn, and I do actually, this one I probably will keep because I do really, really love it, but I'll explain why it was a slight disappointment to me, which is more of an idiosyncratic thing for myself. So this yarn, I mean, the things she does with color are really amazing. When you look at how the brown is playing with the pink and purple. This yarn is called Ginny Visits Zonkos. Ginny's Visit to Zonkos. And as you can see, it's inspired by a pygmy puff because the charm is a little pygmy puff. Focus on that? You gonna focus on that? Hello. Okay, I guess it's not. First of all, I'm pretty sure the pygmy puffs were a Weasley's Wizard Wheezes thing, so I was a little confused by the name. But I have already knit a pair of socks with a Homespun House yarn that was called Pygmy Puff that is a pink and purple. It's not nearly as complex as this. But it was the same kind of theme, and I had made myself a little Pygmy Puff charm for it. So, as wonderful as this is, I feel like the experience of using it is, in a way, a bit of a repetition. So it was like a minor disappointment to me, only because it wasn't something completely different. However, the more I think about it, the more I think I probably will keep it, because I did give away my Pygmy Puff charm, and I think I would use this one, and I also do really love these colors. So I think it's like, I would have liked it to have been something that I hadn't experienced anything similar to before, and yet I do think I would still appreciate and use this yarn. So I'm probably going to keep this one, and I'll probably do a giveaway at some point with this one, I think is what I'm going to do with that. So, there's always a bit of a risk when you do the club yarns in terms of like your own personal style and attachments and expectations. But there's never really a risk in terms of whether the yarn will be beautiful, because it's always beautiful. And if you have fibery friends like you guys, it's easy to find a good home for it. So yeah. What next? 2 more things to show you stash enhancement wise. So the first is a kit. over Black Friday, there were sales for kits at We Are Knitters and Wool and the Gang, and I ordered one from each. They were way marked down, and the Wool and the Gang one came right away. I showed you it a long time ago. The We Are Knitters one was way on back order. It finally showed up, which is fine because it's a summer sweater, so I wasn't going to start it anytime over the winter anyway. This is the Silver Monk sweater, and I got it in the light salmon, which is the colors shown in the photo. I really like that open back. The yarn is called the cotton wool, which is, I believe, 100% cotton. And yeah, so that finally came. That will possibly be making an appearance in the springtime. It could be one of my projects for the Land of Plants, for the Fiber Quest KAL, which is going to be our next land of fiber after goats. So yeah, very excited to finally have this. And the last thing is just a little thing that makes a big difference, and that is a magnetic chart keeper that I went ahead and ordered. It's from Knit Picks, but I ordered it on Amazon because you can get some of their things on Amazon with Prime 2-day shipping, which is pretty sweet, which I recently found out. Oh, the many, many conveniences of living in the continental United States. I swear, like when I watch podcasts and I hear people talk about the taxes and the places where they can and cannot buy things, and I just think about how insanely convenient my life is in terms of that. Like I can get Whole Foods groceries delivered to me in 2 hours and pay no shipping and also get a discount on the regular prices, which is insane. Like, I can buy yarn from across the world and not pay taxes on it, and honestly, like, we're just so spoiled. We're so spoiled here in terms of how, like, international commerce and mailing and stuff works. It's kind of insane. But, so this is, basically, it's this little notebook guy. It has magnets. It's magnetic on both sides, and it comes with these little magnets in a few different shapes and sizes. You have this long one, medium one, and a couple shorties. And then you have this snap that can hold it closed, but it can also attach in the back magnetically to keep it perfectly open so that you can just sit it up and then you can track your chart using the magnet. This was such a lovely, lovely, lovely change when I started working on the EBA again. I got this. At first I was working on the EBA just with my tape and my paper. And I ordered this, and when I started working with it, I just felt like I was flying. Moving the magnet is so much easier than undoing and refixing the tape. Having it propped up where I could look at it instead of having to like lean over or pick it up or whatever. It seems like a small thing, but it sped me up and it made the process so much more enjoyable. I feel like this is a game changer, just like one of the best investments I've ever made. And it was, I don't remember exactly how much, but totally, totally affordable. So if you get Knit Picks where you are, or if you ever see something similar like this in a yarn shop or somewhere else, I recommend it so much. If you do color work or lace or any other kind of chart knitting, just absolutely wonderful. Okay, that brings us to the end of the knitting content, and I'm going to get out my sock and just talk a little bit about the Oscars. I think I'm running a little long, so I don't want to talk too much, but I do want to share. Anyone who's been watching the podcast for a long time saw my very first vlog that I did last winter, which was over the weekend, and we went to the Oscars as a part of it. And we're going to that same party again this evening. It's at our local kind of indie art house cinema, which is just down the road from where we live. And we have a really good time. A lot of times people get dressed up. They wear ball gowns and stuff. We didn't get dressed up last year, but I have in the past. And this year we're actually going to wear costumes, and we're going to both dress as the person Tommy Wiseau, who was the director of The Room and the not the character, but he was the director of The Room, who is portrayed in the film The Disaster Artist. So yeah, that's gonna be fun. We're wearing black wigs and sunglasses, and it's just gonna be really silly, and we're gonna like kind of yeah, like do his voice and just kind of have a good time with that. So I think that's gonna be a lot of fun. So what I really wanted to talk about though is very briefly my thoughts on each of the Best Picture nominees. So I have always loved the Oscars since I was a kid, and I've seen all except one, I think, of the Best Picture winners back until I was born. For the last 5 years or so, I have seen all of the Best Picture nominees, and in most cases, I've been able to see them all before the broadcast, which is fun for me because I like to kind of be more invested and, you know, have an opinion on everything and every winner. I try to see a lot of the ones nominated in the major other categories as well, like a lot of the acting nominees will not be in movies that were nominated for Best Picture sometimes. Director, there's almost complete crossover, and then sometimes I'll see a documentary, animated film, stuff like that as well. So the Best Picture nominees this year, there's 9 of them. They can have up to 10, but they have to get a certain number of like nominating votes to get in there, so that's why there's not always 10. But I chose an honorary 10th that I just saw the other day because it was so lovely. So The Post, so I'm just gonna, these are in no particular order, they're just the order that they came up in when I googled it. The Post, which is a Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep film about the publishing of the Pentagon Papers. Obviously the subject very politically relevant right now, and everyone did a really great job in it. Meryl Streep is just so incredible. Sometimes I couldn't tell if her like dialogue was really well written or if she was just so good at delivering it. I enjoyed this movie, but I felt like it was basically everything I expected it to be. You know, it was made really quickly, and in a way it felt like it was made quickly. I mean, it was made by experts. Steven Spielberg knows what he's doing, and there were no obvious flaws to the movie. It just didn't have the kind of care or originality or, you know, spark that a lot of the other ones had. So perfectly good movie. I don't think it was one of the best of the year. Lady Bird, I absolutely loved. This is Greta Gerwig's first time directing a film on her own. She's done a co-directing before, I believe, and she wrote it. Script is spectacular. Just such a lovely film that I think anyone can relate to about the dynamics in families, coming of age, and particularly difficult mother-daughter relationships where there's a lot of love and a lot of tension there. Just so beautifully portrayed by the actors and so well written. Honestly, I have like no quibbles with this movie. Definitely one of my favorites of the year. Another favorite of the year is Get Out, which came out almost a full year ago. I don't think anyone expected it to be a big Oscars-y movie, but it was so well received that people are still talking about it now. If you don't know, it is this incredible horror movie where it's almost like you take the sort of Stepford Wives concept and apply it to racism instead of sexism. So Stepford Wives is in part this idea of like, you know, am I crazy? Or like, is something sinister going on? And it's a comment on, you know, the way in which women are second-class citizens, and particularly were back at the time when it was taking place and when it was originally written. And Get Out plays around with that idea as well, the idea that when you're a minority experiencing racism, you kind of feel like you're being gaslighted a lot of the time, and you go, you know, you sort of bend over backward to make accommodations and try to assume the best and try to get around situations that feel very strange. And what if there was something even more sinister behind all of that, and, you know, you found yourself in this position. So it also plays on the trope from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner of this black man going to meet his white girlfriend's parents. And so it's got it's just rooted in all of these tropes of old movies and then just subverting them and doing things that are completely new. The tone is amazing because it's both funny and terrifying. It was written and directed by Jordan Peele, who many know as one half of the comedy duo Key and Peele, who had an incredible sketch comedy show on TV for a long time. And I think Jordan Peele is just an absolute genius. I think he's probably one of the greatest creators who has ever lived. I was completely blown away. I mean, I loved everything he and Keegan-Michael Key did with their show. Totally blown away by this movie. It's his very first film that he wrote and directed, and absolutely one of the best of the year, just 100%. And it's so nice too because he and Greta Gerwig are both nominated in the director category as well, and they're both people at the beginning of their career who are not white men, and it's just really, really exciting to see people paying attention to movies like that, and hopefully, you know, is just the beginning of so many more diverse voices being held up, and people seeing movies that aren't exactly like everything that's come before. So those are two of my favorites for sure. Dunkirk is actually my prediction to win. Dunkirk is a Christopher Nolan, it's technically a war movie, but I feel like it's more of a survival movie because it takes place at the evacuation at Dunkirk during World War II, and it's really, you don't really even see the enemy other than just planes overhead, and it's not so much a battle as it is how are these people going to survive long enough to be rescued by the boats, including many civilian boats that are coming across the channel from England. A really interesting war story, I think, and beautifully directed, beautiful score. It can be difficult to follow at times, and that's in part because the characters aren't particularly distinguished, but they're not really distinguished because he's making a point about how young people sacrificed at war are not really given the dignity of being individuals, but instead are these sort of anonymous mass sacrifices. So even though that was like a barrier to entry with the film, I felt like it was a really intentional choice that was effective. It also has a non-chronological timeline, which is something that I like, can also be a barrier to entry, and I think could have been done slightly better, slightly more clearer with some small changes. So that would be my primary gripe with it. It's not exactly my kind of movie for my personal taste, but I do think that it was very well done and had, you know, a really unique spin on the war movie. And so I appreciated that. And the reason that I think it's going to win is that the ballots for Best Picture, unlike the other categories, are done with a preferential ballot. So the way that works is you rank all of your favorites, and then a movie has to have a certain number of first place votes to win outright. And if it doesn't, you take all of the ballots that ranked as their number one, the one that got the fewest number of votes, and you reallocate their number two. And so what this ends up doing is, we've only been doing this for a few years, and I think the first year was when Spotlight won, and then Moonlight won last year. And what it ends up doing a lot of times is the winner is not necessarily going to be a polarizing movie. It's going to be a movie that a lot of people liked. And you know how that happens is it's like it ends up getting some votes that were second place or third place even votes on the ballots of people whose first place movie didn't get very many votes at all. And so it ends up being more of a consensus. And in my mind, trying to figure out how this would work, I think that the movie that's going to get the fewest votes for Best Picture is probably going to be Darkest Hour. And the people who choose that are probably going to put Dunkirk next on their list. And in fact, I think a lot of people are going to put Dunkirk fairly high on their list, even if the most people don't put it at number one. So that's my prediction. It's not my favorite movie of the year, but that's my prediction. Darkest Hour, I just mentioned a moment ago, is telling the same story of Dunkirk, but from a totally different perspective. Instead of being there on the beaches, you're following Winston Churchill, as portrayed by Gary Oldman, who is most likely going to win Best Actor this year. This movie was fine. I really liked Joe Wright, the director, and I felt like he did more with it than you might necessarily see in a movie like this, and I do appreciate when a biopic tells a very specific section of history instead of trying to tell someone's entire life story. I think it's a much better plan. But, you know, definitely not one of the best movies of the year by any stretch of the imagination. I find it unfortunate that performances where actors portray known people tend to get more attention and renown than other performances. And I understand, I mean, I think it's because we want it to have like an objective measure, and so it's easier for someone to look at a performance and say, yeah, he seems like Winston Churchill, therefore he did a good job. Whereas if you're watching someone like Timothée Chalamet portray the fictional character of Elio in Call Me By Your Name, you may not be as certain that he's doing a great job because that's not a real person who you've seen, right? I think this is unfortunate. I think in a lot of ways portraying a real person is easier than portraying a fictional person. And so, you know, I wish that there wasn't this tendency. That being said, I also don't think it's entirely fair to say that Gary Oldman is sort of just doing a Winston Churchill impression. I think that he plays him as a character with real stakes in the moment, and when he delivers the famous "We'll fight them on the beaches" speech before Parliament, he doesn't sound the way that he does in that recording that we've all seen, and that we've all heard, and that's a good choice because that recording was actually made long after we had won the war, and he recorded it for like a record as like a keepsake thing, and so he wouldn't have said it in that same way on the actual day back when victory was unknown and he was trying to win support. And so, you know, he definitely attacked it like an actor living truthfully in those circumstances rather than just trying to match exactly the pitch of the speech that we've all heard, right? So I appreciate that. I still am not a Gary Oldman fan personally, wish that he wouldn't win, don't think it's one of the best movies of the year. The Shape of Water, a lot of people think this one's going to win. It has the most nominations this year, and it's very, very interesting and different. You know, I have my quibbles here and there with it, but I think visually it's absolutely stunning. The performances are stunning, and I love that it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. I think that it has an interesting story and message that, you know, is sort of, it's more of like a fable, and it has some interesting things to say about, you know, the way people are xenophobic, and it tells that story within the confines of this kind of Cold War era moment with commentary on the Cold War, and I think it does all of that really well, and that's a message that's pretty relevant right now. So it's not my number one, but it's definitely up there. I think it's a great movie. Would be very pleased to see it win. Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, likely gonna win Best Actress and Best Supporting Actor, and those are both very well deserved. I would be disappointed if it won Best Picture because I don't think that it's one of the best movies of the year. I thought there was a lot great about it, and I thought it was an extremely ambitious feat, but it really was not entirely successful in a lot of ways for me. So yeah, I'm glad it's being honored, especially for the actors, but I don't think it should win Screenplay or Best Picture. Phantom Thread is hard to even talk about because it's so strange, and I really, really loved it. I had to sit with it for a while to formulate my opinion about it because it was so strange. It's kind of gothic. It's this directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Daniel Day-Lewis stars, says it's his last film. He's incredible, obviously. Paul Thomas Anderson's first job doing his own cinematography. He does it beautifully. The costume design is incredible. The score is incredible. The supporting performances are incredible. And it tells the story that's sort of like this weird gothic love story that goes to very strange places and is darkly funny and unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I'm just on board with this movie. Like, I felt like it definitely has a high barrier to entry. It's one of those things where you're sitting there in the theater and you're sort of like having to let go of all of your own weird reservations and questions and really pay attention to it. It's not going to hold your hand, but it is just meticulously created and tells a completely original story that nonetheless is rooted in sort of tropes and familiar things. A lot of people have been comparing it to Hitchcock's Rebecca. Really pretty dresses, which is always good. And yeah, it's stunning. It will almost certainly not win. It's probably going to be there at the bottom of the pile in terms of how many first place votes it gets for Best Picture. But I hope more people see it. I just think it's incredible, just incredible. And I'm not always a Paul Thomas Anderson fan by any means. I turned off The Master like 3/4 of the way through just because I couldn't do it anymore. So I'm not like a diehard PTA fan. I just really like this movie. Call Me By Your Name is probably my favorite movie of the year. It is the kind of movie you just want to live inside, shot so beautifully, incredible performances. Really wish Timothée Chalamet had a shot of winning lead actor because he's unbelievable. Cannot believe he's like 23. Even if he were 50, it would be an incredible performance. I don't know how else to say that you just want to live inside this movie. It's a really exceptional gay love story in a way that has never really been in mainstream film before, even with something like Brokeback Mountain, which really broke down a lot of barriers. It ended in a way where it had to confront hate crimes and the danger. And Call Me By Your Name doesn't go there. It's not about the politics of it. It's not about bigotry. It's just about this relationship and how this relationship shapes a man as he's, coming of age. And it's just really, really special. And I've read the book and I can't believe they managed to adapt it into a movie so well, because it's like impossible to adapt into a movie. It's kind of insane because there's like no dialogue and so much of it is just about people not connecting, and just a really incredible feat. I hope that wins adapted screenplay as well, because that was just a really, really good job. Okay, and that's the end of the ones that are nominated. My last, I'm just gonna say my my honorary mention for that 10th spot, I just watched a couple days ago because Willem, God, what is his last name? Dafoe. I was about to look it up and then I remembered it. I just watched it a couple days ago because Willem Dafoe is nominated for supporting actor for it, and it's The Florida Project. I don't know if I just said that. It was 2 seconds ago, but I'm not sure if I said it. Oh my gosh, you guys. This movie follows around these kids. They are such naturalistic actors. The dialogue is incredible. It shows you this world of people, people who are like the hidden homeless because they are living in these short stay motel rooms for, long stays, and all in the shadow of Disney World in Florida. And so it's this extreme poverty in the shadow of this extreme symbol of, commerce and dream-like childhoods, and these children living not the greatest childhoods in the circumstances of their poverty. And Willem Dafoe's wonderful. The children are incredible actors in it. I mean, it is a movie about, social issues, and yet it's just not even preachy at all. Like, it's just such a light touch. It really gets you, but you don't feel it like trying to manipulate you emotionally at all. Man, it was just stunning. Really beautiful to watch. All of these like painted pink and purple stucco motels and these, crazy Orlando landmarks and these kids running around in the summertime. just a really, really completely unique experience, and I thought it was an absolute triumph. And I think it's only the second movie made by this filmmaker. The first was Tangerine, which was shot entirely on iPhones and to great effect. So I'm hoping that we're gonna see a lot more where that came from, because it was just incredible. So now I feel like I have gone on and on and on and on and on. I think I probably talked really fast during that portion because I had a lot to say, but I don't want to keep you guys forever. So if you're still here, thanks for tuning in as always. If you haven't subscribed yet, do hit that thumbs up button if you like it. If you would, it would help me out, help other people find me. And thanks for watching again. I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.